The story of Daniel and the lion's den is probably one of the best known stories in the Bible. But did you know that this story actually foreshadows the life and death of Jesus? Let's take a look. Hi, welcome to another episode of Masterpiece. My name is Chris and I want to help you discover just how amazing the Bible really is. If you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by, and of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming exciting episodes. So in the last few episodes, we've looked at some fascinating things in the book of Daniel, including some really interesting parallels between the story of Belshazzar in Daniel 5 and the story of Jesus in the Gospels. By the way, if you missed that video on Daniel 5, make sure to check it out right up here in the info box. Now here's the cool thing. Those parallels between the book of Daniel and Jesus, they don't stop here in chapter 5, but actually continue in the next chapter in Daniel 6. In fact, if you look closely, you can discover at least 10 parallels between what happened to Daniel after Belshazzar's meal of bread and wine and what happened to Jesus after his meal of bread and wine. Watch this. Parallel number 1, both Daniel and Jesus fall prey to a conspiracy. So as you may remember, in Daniel 6, Babylon has already fallen. There's a new king named Darius the Mede, and this king appoints 120 satraps over the kingdom, and over them 3 governors, one of whom is Daniel. Now, as the story continues, Daniel distinguishes himself above all of these people, and the result is that the king wants to put him over the entire kingdom. But this is a problem for the governors and satraps, and so they begin to conspire against Daniel and try to find something they can accuse him of. Sound familiar? That's exactly what happens to Jesus. He also distinguishes himself above everyone else, causing the religious leaders to conspire against him and try to find something they can accuse him of. Parallel number 2, neither Daniel nor Jesus can be accused of any fault. Even though the governors and satraps try really hard, they can't find anything to accuse Daniel of. And the reason is given in verse 4, because he was faithful and no error or fault could be found in him. Which is even more true of Jesus, of course. So it's not surprising that in Mark 14, we read that the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. And later on, Pilate confesses that he can find no fault in Jesus. Parallel number 3, both are filled with the Spirit. Why does Daniel distinguish himself above everyone else? Daniel 6:3, because an excellent spirit was in him. Which again reminds us of Jesus, who from the very beginning of his ministry was filled with the Holy Spirit. Parallel number 4, both are to be put over the entire kingdom. According to Daniel 6:3, because Daniel distinguishes himself above all the other officials, the king wants to put him over the entire kingdom. Now notice that the term kingdom also occurs in the next chapter, in chapter 7, for example in verse 14, where the Son of Man has just come before the Ancient of Days, and then it says, "And to him," that is the Son of Man, "was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him." And when we go to the New Testament, we discover that this Son of Man who is put over the entire kingdom is none other than Jesus. Parallel number 5, both pray before their arrest. Maybe you remember that when the governors and satraps can't find anything to accuse Daniel of, they go to the king and convince him to sign a decree that in the next 30 days, anyone who asks anything from anyone except the king is to be thrown in the lion's den. Now Daniel is not deterred by this decree and keeps praying 3 times a day at the open window towards Jerusalem. Well, of course, the governors and satraps find out, they go to the king, and Daniel is arrested. Which means Daniel prays in his house before his arrest, just like Jesus prays in the garden before he is arrested. Notice also that both pray 3 times. Daniel prays 3 times a day, Jesus prays 3 times in Gethsemane. Parallel number 6. In both cases, the judge sympathizes with the accused. From the very beginning of the story in Daniel 6, it's pretty obvious that Darius has sympathies for Daniel. He wants to set him over the entire kingdom. He's deeply distressed when the governors and satraps accuse Daniel, but very pleased when Daniel remains unharmed. Now, even though Pilate's feelings towards Jesus were probably not quite that strong, when you read the Passion accounts in the Gospels, it's still pretty obvious that Pilate is convinced of Jesus' innocence and sees no need to execute him. Parallel number 7. In both cases, the judge seeks to release the accused, but fails. Note verse 14 in chapter 6. The king set his mind on delivering Daniel, and even until sunset he kept exerting himself to rescue him. but in the end he cannot save Daniel. Just like Pilate, who wants to release Jesus, but in the end hands him over to be crucified. Parallel number 8. Both are sentenced to death and executed. Daniel, of course, is thrown into the lion's den, while Jesus is crucified. Parallel number 9. In both cases, the tomb is closed with a stone and sealed. Notice what happens once Daniel is thrown into the den. According to verse 17, a stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet ring of his nobles. Now compare this with Matthew 27. In verse 60, we read that a great stone was rolled against the entrance of Jesus' tomb, and then in verse 66 it says that the stone was sealed. Parallel number 10. Both Daniel and Jesus reappear from the dead in the morning. The tomb cannot hold either of them. After spending a night with the lions, Daniel is taken up out of the den in the morning, which again reminds us of Jesus, who leaves his tomb on Sunday morning. So there you have it, 10 amazing parallels between the story of Daniel and the story of Jesus, suggesting, among other things, that Jesus is a new Daniel. In other words, he's the truly wise and faithful one who came to us in our exile brought about by sin to reveal to us God's plan of salvation. In fact, Jesus is not just a new Daniel, he's the greater Daniel, because unlike Daniel, who emerged from the lion's den completely unharmed, Jesus was not just severely wounded, he also really died. Even though he was completely innocent, he took all of our sin upon him and paid the ultimate price so that you and I could experience the ultimate deliverance from sin and evil. Darius got it pretty right at the end of chapter 6. Truly, this God is able to save and to deliver. And the good news is, he's able to do it even today. So are those all the parallels between Daniel and Jesus? Probably not. So if you see any others, why don't you let me know in the comments below. Also, I just want to take a moment to thank you guys for all the support, all the encouraging feedback I'm getting. Really appreciate it. So glad the content is helpful for you. If you want to help this channel grow more, keep spreading the word, share the videos with friends and family. Thanks so much. Have fun studying the Bible. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.